following is brought to you by the Manna Mercy Gophers.
Previously on Manna Mercy. In the midst of a vast universe of stars and galaxies, there exists a little speck called planet Earth. This speck travels around a small star called the Sun and is covered with water and land. Water in the form of oceans, lakes, rivers, and streams. Land in the form of mountains, hills, valleys, mesas, and plains. God created the land and the water, the sun, the stars, the galaxies, everything. God loves the whole universe, and God loves the planet Earth. The Creator loves everything on this planet, including a very mysterious thing called life. Wow! Wowza! One form of animal life God created was humans. These partner creatures enjoyed God and helped the Creator take care of the beautiful garden called Earth. They lived in friendship with God, with each other, and with all creation. God smiled. What joy! The little speck called Earth worked. Everything was in balance as each part fit into the whole. All had enough, and the partner creatures loved God and helped God. God's celebration was disrupted when the Earth creatures decided they could find joy in other ways than living as partners with God. Humans decided to find joy by becoming big deals.
Snap!
How did humans know if they were big deals? They knew by bossing other humans around, by piling stuff, by dominating nature, and by reaching glorious heights of health and beauty and knowledge. They also knew by having more points than other humans in their scoring systems. God groaned. Planet Earth groaned. All living things groaned. The whole universe, its harmony disrupted by the selfishness of the human species, wept. Sorrow filled the cosmos. Once upon a time, God was vexed with a nation called Egypt. In this nation, a big deal pharaoh was on top. In the middle were various big deals and ordinary citizens. On the bottom were slaves who lived under heavy oppression.
This is the way it is, and the way it will always be.
The slaves, moaning under the brutal oppression, cried out to God. God heard their cry and recruited a reluctant man named Moses, a relative of the slaves, to help with the liberation. Through Moses and his sister Miriam and his brother Aaron, God irritated the big deal Pharaoh until Pharaoh cried, "Get out of Egypt! Out! Out! Out!" Miriam and all the women danced with Yahweh over the liberation. They were free. God felt like a mother who had birthed a child, a new people to partner with God to mend the universe. The liberated slaves left Egypt and entered a time of instruction in the wilderness where God taught them 3 lessons. God gives manna for all.
Manna.
Hoarding stinks.
Ew, gross, yuck.
The gift of Sabbath. Through these lessons, the partner people learned that Yahweh wanted them to live in peace with all creation and that they could trust Him to provide for all their needs. In this time of early Israel, Yahweh also gave gifts of the covenant word, the blessed way they were to live, and worship, the joyful activity of praising God.
Hear, O Israel, Yahweh your God is one God.
And you shall love Yahweh your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength.
Yahweh had hoped for the liberated people that they would faithfully love Him and others. Manna living would be a grateful response of a liberated people. God knew that for the people to stay faithful to manna living, they would have to hold 2 qualities in balance, righteousness and mercy. Righteousness is following the words of the covenant gift, the Holy Torah, which describes the manna life, the just way to live together. Mercy is practicing compassion towards the most vulnerable in society, the widows, orphans, and sojourners. After 40 years of learning the manna way, the partner people were ready to move into the land God promised them. The conquest of the land was a slow and painful process. Other people groups were living on the land and were conquered by the partner people. Even in these acts of violence, God worked to mend the universe. Former slaves from Palestinian cities and former slaves from Egypt became one family. Yahweh rejoiced because once again oppression was broken, slaves were liberated, and new people joined the covenant community. At the same time, God wept because many of the oppressors died. Like the Egyptians who died in the Red Sea, they were victims of their own need to oppress. The people now had a home, and their first task was to divide the land among the clans. Yahweh rejoiced when larger clans received more land and smaller clans received less. They were applying the lessons from wilderness school so that no one had too much and no one had too little. They lived in Shalom, where nothing was missing and nothing was broken. They lived together and shared the provisions of Yahweh. During these days of early Israel, God's partner people lived in relative equality. They avoided a sharp distinction between rich and poor. They did, however, have trouble with their neighbors, people groups who pestered, attacked, and stole from them. Finding a solution to this problem ended up dividing the people. The majority wanted to become like the other nations and have a king. They thought a king would protect them and believed that these leaders would stay faithful to Yahweh.
We need a king to protect us from our enemies. We must live in the real world. You need not fear. The king will not oppress us because he will be one of us, under God and the covenant. I plead with you, for the sake of our national security and the safety of our children, we must have a king.
The rest resisted the idea of a king because it seemed too much like other nations, and the risk of becoming a divided people was too great.
If we have a king, we will become like other nations. We'll have military conscription. Elites will grab the land and trust it to our families. We'll become like slaves. We'll have to do hard labor for the king and his big deals. The king will lay heavy tax burdens on us. We will cry out to God in our oppression.
I think we're losing.
Yahweh and Samuel, a special friend of Yahweh, finally gave in and decided to let the partner people try to stay committed to the way of righteousness and mercy under the authority of a king. What God hoped for did not work out. Israel had become what Israel had left, Pharaoh's Egypt.
Order is good.
Order is very good.
The big deal ways of Israel's kings led to the partner people splitting off to make their own nation called Judah. The tribes of Israel and the tribes of Judah both increasingly forgot the ways of the liberator God and chose instead the ways of their neighbors. The partner people no longer lived in Shalom, but adopted ways of division and oppression. What made a bad situation worse was that the people thought they could show up once a week, or even once a day, to sing a few songs and make some sacrifices to keep Yahweh pleased with them. This hypocrisy grieved Yahweh, and all of creation groaned because the old vision had faded. All but a small remnant had turned from the man away. Consequences for this turning from Yahweh included generations of war with neighboring nations, forced exile, oppression, and persecution.
Get moving, everybody.
The Great Persecution!
We will wipe Yahweh worship off the face of the earth.
Even when the war subsided, the partner people had a difficult time remembering the man away. The people who were supposed to lead and guide the people to follow Yahweh more faithfully, the priesthood, adopted big deal ways and partnered with the established systems of oppression to create vast poverty and inequality.
This is the way it is.
And the way it will always be.
Just like the first liberation from Egypt, the poor and oppressed cried out to God. This group, called the Anuim, were favored by Yahweh. They were chosen as the group to first welcome Emmanuel, the human who would usher in a new creation and again liberate the partner people and restore Manna society.